Man, I'm so happy that we can have these guys in here. Tony, Pete.
Yep.
Keep your last names anonymous because these guys are some of the most wanted men in the state. When you want to know how to make some of the best whiskey in the state of Connecticut, you must head over to our friends at Litchfield Distillery. As Tony and Pete in here bringing some of samples of the best nectar that they can provide. They're going to be a part of the 8th annual Whiskey Sun Union Saturday the 13th at Mohegan Sun. It gets started with the tasting in the big ballroom at 8 o'clock. We'll be down there at 12 promoting this thing all day long. They will have the cigar stop at the very beginning of this, a big clay pipe smoke shop that they have for, 2 hours, 6 to 8, and then the whiskey begins. Boys, so happy to have you guys in here. We've talked Litchfield Distillery a couple of times on this show, but it's been too long since you guys have been in the studio with some of your stuff. Just talk about the event. You guys have been a part of the Whiskey Union since day one.
We have, and we've got a great relationship with Mohegan Sun. We've done a lot of events there. We're happy to be sponsored with them. They're a top-notch organization. They run everything, really smooth, and they're great to work with.
Speaking of smooth, your guys' stuff is super smooth out there. Now, what are you bringing to the party for the whiskey? Have you decided yet of what whiskeys you're going to bring? Not 100%,
but some of the ones we'll taste today will be there today. Our 4-year straight bourbon, our 5-year double barrel is very popular. We have a nice, our oldest release up to this point is a 6-year that we did a special release for last fall. We're going to sample that and maybe 1 or 2 of our flavored bourbons.
There you go.
As far as aging, how do you guys go about this? I mean, I did an event years ago, and they talked about, like 12-year, 18-year, things like that. And you guys, it seems like you're taking them out a little bit earlier. But how do you sit there and not want to take something out early to just see if it's okay?
That is a problem, but we do taste them from time to time to see how they're aging. But typically, we've been at this for 10 years now. We're very proud to be in our 10th year of distilling. And so it does take a while for things to get, the bourbon to get older. So you don't make a 10-year-old bourbon on day one. You got to wait 10 years for it.
Do you have any bourbon right now that you haven't opened?
We do. Our oldest bourbon in barrels right now it's in its 9th year. So, in the very beginning, you're sort of making what you're selling. You're selling younger bourbon, not quite mature to where we are now. So when you're building slow. You're building your inventory slow. So in the beginning, we were lucky enough to be successful enough that we were selling enough bourbon that we didn't have a lot of barrels to get older and older. So 3 years ago, we put a second still in, and now we've doubled our capacity. And then some of the original stuff that we were able to hold back is coming of age now. Like I said, our oldest is 10-year. We've released now our 6-year. This fall, we'll probably release a 7-year as well.
Unreal. Yeah, go ahead. I saw your nod with the little grin like there are a couple of barrels in the back nobody knows about that I'm watching.
Well, I was just going to add to that. When we added the second still, they built an expansion for a brand new rick house. It's got over 1,500 casks in there aging. It's the largest rick house in the state of Connecticut. And when you walk in there, it's just a bourbon lover's dream. You're just faced with 1,500 barrels, and the aroma in there is great. It's a great destination to come up and take a visit and see that in person.
All right, explain this all to our listeners, because you're using vocabulary that the normal whiskey drinker doesn't even know about. Cask, rick house. Explain the process of why when you see old barrels, you guys get all geeked up about that as distillers.
Well, you want to go first?
Well, I guess it's the same. You get geeked out if you see old baseball memorabilia.
Right.
You want to, and for us, it's a little bit different because we made that, so we get to go and look at what we made every day and how it's growing. And Tony mentioned the aroma, and a rick house, by the way, is a fancy way of saying barrel storage room.
Thank you. I was thinking, what is a rick house? Is it a warehouse
where Rick lives?
Exactly. So, but it's funny. People come in and, oh my God, it smells so good in there, but I can't even smell it anymore. I'm just so used to being in there all the time. But people do get a big kick of coming out. We do a very nice tour, explain a lot about what we do with the processes, and then we do a very nice tasting at the end. And so we get a pretty big crowd there on the weekend, so it's fun to see people come and learn about what we do.
And what makes it smell good, there's actually evaporation that happens very slowly. And so that the term for that is called the angel share. So what's evaporating going up to the heavens is the angel share, and what's left is called the devil's cut. So when you got that many barrels in the storage facility, rick house, it just creates a beautiful aroma. So you walk in there and you're just, wow, it's fantastic.
Now, at LitchfieldDistillery.com, if you guys want to schedule a tour with these guys, they love giving out tours. And like Pete was saying, you get the samples at the end. It's one of the best things to do on the weekend here in the state of Connecticut. They're going to be a part of the 8th Annual Whiskey Sun Union, like you guys always are. If you still want tickets for that, visit Mohegan Sun website and their box office. Now, explain to the people, too, the barrels and like why whiskey is brown and some of the process of getting the 6-year, getting the flavors that you guys provide.
Yeah, so, well, anyway, the age of bourbon is decided by how long it's been in a barrel for. So what you have here is in the bottles, whatever year they are, that's what they're going to be. So it's only the amount of time it's been in a barrel for. And it's funny because people come in and they think, like, we make brown liquid, but we don't. Everything that comes off our still is clear, whether we're making vodka or gin. So 100% of the color for bourbon comes from the barrel itself, and the barrels have to be American white oak, and they have to have some level of charring done to the inside of them, which means at the cooperage where they make the barrels, they have to burn the inside of the barrel to a specific, not a specific, but ours are specifically the number 4 char, which they call the most char. So it cracks the wood nice and wide, lets the bourbon go in nice and deep into the barrels, pulls those wood flavors out. So when you get the wood flavors mingling with the grain flavors, that's what, where it really starts to become mature, and that's where different bourbons taste different. Depends on what the grains they use. Now, bourbon has to be at least 51% corn. It has to be 100% grain. So the mash bill, another fancy term, is just a fancy way of saying grain recipe. So we use 70% corn, 25% rye, and 5% malted barley. So we're known as a high rye bourbon. Other bourbons use wheat in there. Another thing special for us is all the grains we use are grown here in Connecticut. So all of our corn comes from Pleasant View Farm up in Somers. Our malted barley comes from the Thrall family farm up here by the airport. Excuse me. And then our rye comes from a farm that's in the Watertown, Woodbury area. So we try to support the local farmers as much as we can. We use about 1,700 pounds a day of locally grown grains.
That's fantastic. We're talking to Tony and Pete from Litchfield Distillery. Talk about that. Tennessee whiskey. Everybody knows what Jack Daniels. I did a thing for Dickel whiskey. What differentiates like the East Coast whiskey? What would you put a name on this whiskey if you're selling it across the country?
I don't know that. I mean, regional grains are going to taste different in different regions based on the soil composition. Barrels can impart different nuances based on where those oak trees were grown. So, especially with us on a small batch, if you will, we're a small batch distillery. We just had a tasting today with some of our partners, and you get different nuances out of individual barrels, even though they might have been filled around the same time and they're the same manufacturer, just where they were in the rick house. Maybe they had a little more evaporation, a little less evaporation. So there's a lot of little nuances. Now the big national companies, I don't want to necessarily speak for them, but they're more about consistency in their products, so it tastes the same to their consumer all the time. Ours from batch to batch isn't always going to taste identical.
I would also say, that we hypothesize that there's something unique about Connecticut soil. Perhaps it's got a special mineral composition that's a little different than maybe than the Midwest. Perhaps that's from the Ice Age and all the the rocks and stones coming down.
Yeah.
But Connecticut corn, I'm sure you've had it. It's luscious. It's
fantastic,
sweet,
right?
And we think there's something very special. At least I do with the rye that's grown here. We brought rye for you to try, but there's almost most ryes are kind of spicy and nice and peppery. Ours has this beautiful cinnamon note that comes off on the finish, which I don't necessarily pick up on other ryes that you find in the country. So the high rye that's in the bourbons adds a little bit of that kind of spicy and cinnamon note on the finish, which a lot of people love.
Which one of your whiskeys would you recommend for someone like myself that's more of a beginner that doesn't drink a lot of whiskey? Not because I don't want to. I just don't know the difference.
Yeah. So typically I would tell you that our 4-year, what we call our 4-year straight bourbon whiskey that's been proofed down to 92 proof, that's our most popular bourbon. But if you really want to get into like a novice bourbon drinker, we make some very nice, naturally flavored bourbons. That I brought a maple flavored one here, so it takes a little bit of the edge off of a straight bourbon and adds a little bit of sweetness from the maple in the process we do. We actually partner with a maple syrup company that's based here in Connecticut. They're Maple Craft, and they source their syrup from Vermont. So what we do with them is we let them borrow our empty bourbon barrels. They take them to Vermont. They get them filled up with the maple syrup. So they make a very, very nice bourbon-flavored maple syrup for us. But now there's residual syrup in those barrels that he can't quite get out. So we get those barrels back, fill them back up with bourbon, let that bourbon sit in there for about 6 months. So it gives it a little flavor, not overly powering. But we make that, we make a vanilla, we make a coffee, and a cinnamon. So for people that are kind of interested in brown spirits but don't want that full effect of a straight bourbon, it kind of helped them get into the...
Did you bring in the maple with you?
I did.
You damn Could right. I try that?
You sure can.
All right, enough talking. Let's start drinking. LitchfieldDistilleries.com. Pete and Tony are going to break out some of the tastings right now, and I do recommend the straight to everybody. Like the straight, I call it the red label, Pete.
Exactly.
That's
a lot of people do. So we're going to start out with a straight bourbon.
All right. So this is
typically we say take 2 or 3 little baby sips, get your taste buds acclimated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where's your oh yeah?
Mm-hmm. Let me do the now that I'm acclimated, Pete.
Okay.
I
That's
love
good
this stuff. It's so smooth too.
Yeah.
Like usually this stuff will grab you, slap you in the face in a while. Not this one. It's got a little bit of a sting in the back of the throat. Yep. Other than that, man, it is so smooth going down.
Now, for you guys, you make this.
How much you drink in a day?
I was going to ask that, but when you're sitting down, like a lot of like the Whiskey Union, food, cigars, you could be maybe watching sports, doing all three. You know, what would you guys? You're just
So the first one.
What do you bring home with you that you prefer?
So. People ask me what's my favorite. I don't have a favorite. If I could only ever take one bottle home, it would be what we just tried, the first one, because at 4 years old, it's a very mature bourbon, and as you just experienced, it can stand on its own. Maybe put a little ice cube in there. I'm an old-fashioned drinker. Our dad brought us up drinking old-fashions, and so that is also the one I would use to make my old-fashioned, because as a straight bourbon, that bourbon flavor is going to come through the bitters and the simple syrup in an old-fashioned, so it makes a really nice old-fashioned. So to me, it's very versatile. Now, the one you're going to try now, did I give you one?
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Is our 5-year process. Just means that. So for us, when this was 4 years old, we dumped the barrels. We added proofing water to it to bring the proof down. When the bourbon goes in our barrels, it's going to be around 120 to 125 proof. It's got to be by law below 125. It can come out at a different proof depending on what's going on. But in our case, for the 5-year double barrel, whatever proof it came out of the barrel at, we added enough proofing water to it to bring the proof down a bit. We let that mixture mix, and we put it back in the same barrels for another year of aging. So I can't call it a straight bourbon whiskey because it's been in a barrel twice. It was not in its original brand-new barrel for its lifetime like the first one. But this double barreling process is a very high-end finishing process, and if you taste it, it's going to take a little bit of that straight bourbon whiskey away, so it's a really good sipping bourbon.
I was going to say this is a lot easier for me to drink than the first one.
Right.
It gets the extra year allows the proofing water to take on characteristics from the barrel, so it kind of just the mouthfeel,
As much as you think you're going to the Whiskey Sun Union to like drink, really gaining a huge wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely.
Like, this is just really, we're sampling the alcohol, but really just sampling some of the information that you get. Every time I'm around you guys, I learn more about Litchfield Distilleries. I didn't know how local it was, especially with all the ingredients. That's just really kind of mind-blowing here today. But you got the maple on standby?
I do. You want to try that?
Mm-hmm. This is, now tell us about this one. Like, how long have you been working?
This was one of our early on projects that we did, and we do a lot of. This is a staple that we have available all the time.
Yeah, some of them are deeper for people, since it's radio, can't see it. You have to go to the YouTube later when we put this on YouTube.
What, the color's different?
Yeah, why is some of them deeper?
Well,
is that how long it's been sitting in the bottle?
Right, so like Tony said, the 4-year was proofed after it came out of the barrel, so the dilutes the proof and it will dilute some of the color. Now, the 5-year-old was proofed and then went back in the barrel again, plus it's a year older, so it's I'm pointing to like the radio people can hear me. So,
right.
But this will be a little dark. 4-year-old maple
Yes.
too, because it has some of the residual maple in it. Did you get one?
No.
You gotta hook up Tony, man.
He's never had it before.
Oh, really?
No, yeah.
I was gonna say should be in the whole distillery drinking this all day.
Oh, that's good.
So again, it takes some of the.
That's a lot different than the first two.
Sure. Yeah. It's a little different proof. It's 86 proof. It's a little less proof. So it's.
The first one I drank, if I drank a glass of that, I'd be for that.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
that's
just being
why.
honest. That was like, whoa.
If you're gonna drink bourbon without,
Of course you do.
outside of a cocktail,
You're not old like me.
if you're going to drink straight bourbon, no matter what it is, you just need to sip it for a long time.
Right.
You don't drink it like a beer.
So the maple is all just the maple that was in the barrel, taken out of the barrel, and somewhat the residual maple is
you can
in the
taste
wood.
it.
Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
it almost feels like you poured maple syrup in this.
No,
you
it's
can really taste it.
And again, it's a small batch. The next batch may have a little bit more mapley flavor, maybe a little less.
How did you hook up with these guys in Vermont? Are they friends of yours, or are you just like?
Well, actually, I said they're based in Connecticut. It's called Maple Craft.
But you seem very particular. You do.
Well, again, I mean, although the syrup does come from Vermont, we like to do business with local Connecticut companies, and we do have some history with that family that we knew them for a while before they were even in the syrup business. So it was a good marriage, good partnership.
And these guys are cool with everybody, man. There's so many there. You said 15 are going to be there out of the.
I don't know how many are going to be
there's
there.
only 15 in the state of Connecticut. is what
15
you're
or
saying.
16, something like that.
I think there's close to 50 distilleries and spirit companies going to be at the Whiskey Fest.
The list is huge. 8 o'clock till 11 o'clock. Saturday, April 13th. It's going to be in the Earth Ballroom at the Mohegan Sun. Go to their box office to get tickets and scoop them up this week because they could be sold out. This is an awesome event, and
Yes.
you guys are always a part of it and always teaching the whiskey drinker as well. So we went through the straight, we did the double,
Right.
we did the maple. What's next, Tony? You're eyeing something back there. What do you like?
Well, I don't know how we're doing on time, but we got to share
more minutes.
our 6-year bottle and bond, which was a limited release we did for the holiday season. So they're kind of limited and hard to find at this point out in retail, but they're still out there.
That was me.
But there's more 6-year bourbon coming down the pike for sure.
And you guys.
So if we come up, are you the warehouse where all this stuff is?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll pull some juice out of
Because
the
I'm into
barrels
all
for
that
you.
kind of stuff. I love antique stuff. I love all the what you guys are talking about, and it's just fantastic.
So,
I love the bottles, dude. I used to dig up bottles because where I lived in Southington, we lived near a farmer, and they had been 3-4 generations of farmer, and they dumped all these bottles in this one area. Had I known that they old 1800 bottles, early 1900 bottles would be worth money, I would have kept them.
Right.
I think my mother still has a few of them. She's 91, but back in the day, we just dug them up because they were cool looking.
Exactly.
How did you decide on what kind of style bottle and stuff that goes on the bottle?
Well, I've got to give my brother Jack and Tony a lot of credit. Tony's been with us since the beginning. Tony does all of our social media, our marketing, and most importantly, at this point, our brand development and the brand build that he did for us is tremendous. So I'll let Tony talk a little bit about that.
Well, Pete's brother Jack found the bottle design, and which we just thought was nice and unique, and the shape is nice strong shoulder.
It's a solid bottle.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the one thing. It's a very, I don't want to say masculine.
It doubles
but
as a weapon.
yeah.
It doubles
It's
as
a
a
gorgeous
You
bottle too.
A couple and they don't break.
No, hey, I'm not worried about it today. Not at all. All right,
But I should the whole essence of the brand has been built around the spirit of hard work. That's our tagline. That's the values we incorporated. That line came out of the Baker brothers. These guys roll up their sleeves. If you're up there, you'll see them mopping the floors. You'll see them replacing a valve on the still. You'll see them out. These things, they're out like we are today. These guys are the essence of the spirit of hard work, and we believe to achieve anything great, you got to, roll up your sleeves and do the work.
Absolutely.
what do I got now, Pete?
So that's the 6-year. Tony was just explaining. Every fall we do what we call founders release. Brothers and I and Tony get together and we decide on maybe a different kind of finish. We finish bourbon in port wine barrels, sherry wine barrels, Cabernet wine barrels. We do different finishes, which are nice. But this is a 6-year what they call bottled in bond, and back I don't know in the 1930s or whatever, I can't remember if it was before or after Prohibition, but they, whiskey was kind of the wild, wild west, and consumers didn't know exactly what they were getting when they bought a bottle of whiskey. So the government came out with a designation called bottled in bond, and of course, if you pay the government a tax, then you could use that designation on your label, and that was telling the people that the government basically oversaw that what the label said is what you're buying. And it has some, guidelines. So it has to be over 4 years old. It has to be bottled at 100 proof. Has to be distilled and barreled at the same distillery. And there's a few other items that you have to do to be able to call your product bottled in bond. It's kind of a lost term now, but some bourbon aficionados kind of look for that, and it's kind of neat when you see one.
That's funny that you guys do toe those lines as far as like you're like selling to me, who I'm looking for a good bottle of whiskey, the top shelf stuff that I can drink just by myself, and I don't care about all these whiskey rules that you speak of. But then you also adhere to the aficionado that is just in it for like the purity of a whiskey drinker.
Yeah. Well, the worst thing that could happen is if we mislabel something and got called out on it. I mean, that just ruins your brand. All the brand identity stuff Tony was talking about before, it goes down the drain if you don't do things the right way, and we were brought up to do things the right way. So,
man, you guys are wonderful. You're going to be a part of the Whiskey Sun Union.
Take great pride in what you do, and honestly, it shows.
I don't know if Kurt says we got to go to break because we're on time or because he wants to start.
Yeah, no, we need to.
I think you know the answer to that.
Yeah, Tony, Pete, Litchfield
great,
Distillery,
man.
we really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate being here.
Thank you.
We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. Hartford Athletic, Romario Williams, striker, will join us next on the Rob Dibble Show with Ben Darnell in your afternoon drive on Fox Sports Radio.